This is John, and I'm talking about how I incorrectly worked the 12 steps of recovery. I've now arrived at step 12, which says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry the message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I'm not sure, but I think that's the longest sentence of all the steps. It's also the last of the 12 steps. So I'm going to talk about it in terms of the first time I worked through the 12 steps. By the time I reached this step, I had already failed to get sober. The steps were not building on each other. They had simply become useless to me way before this step. But to my credit, I did continue attempting to work the steps. So when I read this, it said, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, which simply wasn't true. Therefore, what good was this step going to do me? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics, So I was not an alcoholic, but I had a compulsion that was destroying my life. And I would have loved to have carried a message of hope to other people in my condition, but I didn't have a message. And it concludes by saying, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I'm told sometimes they did refer to the steps themselves as principles. So I was saying in this step I would practice these principles in all our affairs. But the principles had not worked for me. I didn't have an awakening. I didn't have a message to carry. And I didn't have anything to practice. Didn't have any principles to practice in all my affairs. Later, I did go through the steps with much more information and insight from long sober people who had worked the steps and gotten sober. The second time through, step 12 took on an entirely different meaning because of the previous 11 steps. Now when it said, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, I had had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. It occurred during step 9, exactly as the big book predicted. When we are halfway through this phase of our development, we will begin to know a new freedom and a new happiness. That happened to me in step 9, and it continued as I worked the steps. I had learned a way to turn my bitterness, my resentment, my fears, my regrets into serenity. So I now had a message that I could carry to still suffering people. Now, I want to tell you, I saw a pamphlet that said, what is the message we carry? What is the message we carry? And according to the writer of that pamphlet, it said the message we carry is that the steps worked when I worked them. Again, I could now honestly say the steps had worked when I worked them. And to practice these principles in all our affairs. The second time I worked the steps, I believe I worked them correctly because I was able to get sober and stay sober one day at a time. But I had to practice these principles in all my affairs. It was no longer focusing on the compulsion that had nearly taken my life, and instead I was actually focusing on having a life that was valuable, enjoyable, worth living, rewarding, And I just felt like it's worth whatever work that's required to practice these principles in all my affairs, because it's given me my life back. So that's how I would like to conclude these recordings, is to say, whatever you have to do to find your way to work in the steps such that you are able to get your life back, your sanity back, your sobriety back, do that. It may be very different than the way I've described it. I've purposely told you about all the incorrect things I did, just so that you'll understand what a staggeringly large amount of mistakes I made. But because I continued refusing to settle for insanity, because I continued to go to meetings, work with a sponsor, work the steps, and connect with the higher power that I discovered through doing those things, I've been able to stay sober one day at a time, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. I try to carry my message through these recordings to you. Even though I know you may get nothing out of it, you may think this has been a colossal waste of your time. I hope not, but I apologize if it has been. What it's done for me is allowed me to practice these principles in all my affairs. So this is John. I do hope to see you further down the road, one day at a time, sane, sober, and free.